Good or bad? Good for us? Would you rather a bourbon or scotch? Not the defense. This is an old defense trick.
Getting liquored up.
That's right. Particularly the DWI.
Why I'll bring it to you.
Okay. Call for trial, State of Texas versus Victor Alvarez. Stay ready?
That's ready, Your Honor.
Vince?
This is ready, Your Honor. I'm looking for my client one. Can you help me out with that?
Yeah, right back there. Somebody close by.
Anybody?
Yeah, right there. Ms. Bailey, you know the rules of this court. Next time, have your client down here in his seat when we're ready to go, or you'll be in contempt. Mr. Roark, you're such a nice man. Are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, proceed.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian Roark. I'm the prosecutor in this case. We're here today because Mr. Victor Alvarez has been charged with the offense of driving while intoxicated. Now, this first stage of the trial is called Voir. It's my opportunity and Ms. Bailey's opportunity to talk to you, to ask you questions, basically to see how you feel about things. More importantly, though, this is your only opportunity to ask us questions. So I urge you to take that opportunity. After Ms. Bailey and myself sit down, if you have questions later in the trial, hopefully Ms. Bailey and myself will have addressed those questions, but if we haven't, you will not be able to raise your hand. So I urge you to please ask now. Additionally, if y'all aren't talking to me, I'm going to stand up here for a long time. Our job is to see how you feel about driving and drinking, specifically in this case, and generally about other issues in your lives. So the more you talk, the less time I'm going to be up here, and I know that y'all appreciate that, and everyone else in the courtroom will appreciate that as well. Now, I kind of view jury service as community type activity, and hopefully after you leave here today, you're going to find that you've met at least 3 new friends, and possibly you're going to have to be working with some of these folks later on. So in the spirit of that, and the fact that we might be here a while, thank you. I'd like everybody to stand up real quick and introduce yourself to your neighbor and maybe shake hands. And get ready to start.
Jim Burroughs.
I'm David.
Jim Burroughs.
John Burroughs. Okay, we're here today to talk about drinking and driving, so let's jump right into it. Mr. Bird, when I mention the words driving while intoxicated, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
First thing that comes to mind for me is the time I was pulled over.
Okay. How old are you, Mr. Bird?
I'm 27.
Okay. When did you get pulled over?
I was pulled over once. I'm not exactly sure how long ago it was, maybe a couple of years ago.
Now I'm assuming by the fact you said you were pulled over by a police officer or sheriff's deputy, something like that. Where was that?
It was in Maine, I believe.
What were you pulled over for?
Suspicion of driving while intoxicated.
Okay. What happened to you on that particular occasion?
Well, I blew on the intoxilizer, and I was released.
Okay. This brings up a good point, and I appreciate your divulging that. If at any point during this process, I'm going to be asking specific people questions, I'm also going to be asking you questions as a group. If for some reason you don't feel comfortable discussing whatever it is with the new friends that you made here today, that's no problem. Please just tell me about that, and we'll talk about it in front of the judge. You said that you were released after you blew. Let's back up just a little bit. Did you take what are commonly called field sobriety tests when you were initially pulled over?
Geez, I don't exactly remember. I think he had me touch my hand or my nose or something like that.
And is it possible you did more than one test, or you think that was it?
I think I might have walked a little bit in the line or something, but I don't exactly remember. I think I did a couple checks for him.
How did you feel you had performed on those tests?
I thought I did great.
Okay.
Did pretty well.
Did you think they were fair tests?
Yeah, I thought they were all right. You know, I wasn't really exactly sure what they were looking for, but so I didn't. But yeah, I thought they were okay.
Had you been drinking that day?
Yeah, I had a few drinks. Yeah.
And so you went down and you were asked to blow into an intoxilizer instrument?
Yes.
Are you aware that when you sign to get your driver's license, that you automatically consent to blowing into an intoxilizer instrument if you're stopped for suspicion of driving while intoxicated?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Okay. Ms. Ford, are you aware of that?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Mr. Burleson, how about yourself?
I think I've heard that before.
Mr. Daly?
Wasn't aware.
Do you recall what came out of the instrument after you blew?
What came out of it? You mean what?
Do you recall what the results were?
Well, I know I passed it.
Okay. Do you know what the legal limit for intoxication is in Texas?
Oh, it's .10.
Okay. And are you aware that it was the same thing 2 years ago when you blew into that instrument?
Yeah, I think so. I think I was just below.
Okay.
Just below.
And you were released essentially immediately after that, is that correct?
They released me.
Okay. Did you feel that you were treated unfairly at all during that process?
Not particularly. No.
Mr. Daly, what about yourself? When I mention the words driving while intoxicated, what comes to mind?
Dead bodies.
Mr. Burleson, how about yourself?
It makes me think of the commercials I see on television.
Okay, what commercials are there?
Well, one comes to mind, the one where it shows like a videotape of a family, and it's like a little baby's playing with their dad or something, and it's real endearing. And then the screen kind of goes blank, and there's writing that says, such and such were killed by a drunk driver on such and such date. That's what I mean.
How do you feel about those commercials? Do you think they're effective at all? Do they make you not want to drink and drive?
They are. They do bring out emotions and make you think about stuff like that. So I think they are effective.
Ms. Ford, how about yourself?
I think of Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Okay. Mr. Byrd, when I mention the word intoxicated, what comes to mind? When I say intoxicated, what does that mean to you?
Well, I want to say drunk, but I suppose you want to know what that meant to me too. Dizzy, unable to understand your surroundings. Maybe sounds a little fun sometimes, bad sometimes. I don't really know how to answer it.
Okay, that's fair enough. Mr. Bailey, how about yourself? What's intoxication mean to you?
Maybe someone has succumbed to a weakness.
Okay. And Mr. Burleson, how about yourself?
I would just say someone who's had a few too many, is a little bit not sure of his or her surroundings, maybe dizzy, things kind of slow down for the person, not as aware as they normally are.
Ms. Ford?
It means out of control.
Out of control. Okay. Has anyone here, I don't mean to label myself by mentioning this, probably as a dork if anything, but does anyone here watch the Andy Griffith Show? I'm going to raise my hand. Okay, we've got a couple of people that don't look ashamed about that. Is everyone here, are y'all familiar with the Andy Griffith Show, at least? Ms. Ford?
I don't think I've seen I know Ron Howard was in it, but I've never seen an episode.
Are y'all familiar with Otis? Everyone?
Oh, the town drunk?
Exactly. Okay. And that's what I wanted to bring out. Ms. Ford, I'll try to explain this to you. But Otis is your stereotypical town drunk. Now, Mr. Bird, would you agree that when they show Otis, he's stumbling around, usually he can barely talk, and if you were going to put it on the spectrum, he would probably be on the far end of intoxication. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. Usually it's in the morning when it happens, so it's more hungover than anything.
Okay. Did you ever see him trying to ride the donkey?
Didn't see that.
Okay. Mr. Daly, would you agree with that? That usually when they show Otis, they show the stereotypical signs of intoxication, something that if you saw an individual, you would think that person is drunk.
Absolutely.
Okay. Ms. Ford, does that help at all? Can you imagine at least your stereotypical what you would think of someone who was really, as you in your own words, out of control?
Definitely.
Now, would you also agree, Ms. Ford, that there's different levels of intoxication?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And the level we're talking about with Otis and your stereotypical drunk person would be probably on the far end, being the more intoxicated person. Would you agree with that?
No, I think a more intoxicated person probably would have passed out.
Okay, and that would be the extreme level. Would you agree with that?
Right.
Okay. Mr. Daly, if you were a legislator and you wanted to come up with a definition of intoxication that we could all work with, meaning the citizens of this state, police, prosecutors, juries, etc., to determine what intoxication is, does anything come to mind?
Well, I don't really know the legal stuff.
Just common sense, that's all I'm asking.
Common sense, any amount that hinders your faculties.
Okay. And that's because, or Mr. Burleson, would you agree with that?
Not necessarily.
Okay, what would you change, or?
I think that any amount of alcohol you drink, it seems to me, I don't know a lot about it, but my understanding is that any amount of alcohol you drink lessens your faculties, somewhat. So I would, if I was making the law, I think I would say that it hinders your faculties such that you're no longer able to safely, drive an automobile.
Okay. Mr. Burleson, is it illegal to drink and then drive in Texas?
No.
Mr. Daly, I saw you nodding your head. Do you disagree with Mr. Burleson?
I think it is illegal to drink and drive in Texas.
Okay.
Sure. That's why we're here, I think.
Are you talking about drinking at the same time you're driving? Well, what if I have a couple of beers right now, go out, get in my car and drive? Is that per se illegal?
It's wrong.
Okay. So maybe if it's not illegal, it should be illegal. Is that? Would you agree with that?
Well, I don't like to. I don't like to push my beliefs off on other people, but I think it's wrong.
Okay. Mr. Bird, how about yourself? Is that illegal?
Well, I don't think so.
Okay, and you know it's not illegal,
Right.
correct? Because at least on one occasion, you did drive after drinking, right?
Wanted to.
And you were allowed to leave after that,
Right.
correct? Okay. And that's exactly correct. In Texas, it's not against the law to drink and then drive. What is against the law is to drink at the point of intoxication and then get in your vehicle. Now, Mr. Bird's brought up a good point. I just want to ask everybody, who here has ever had a drink, or two, or three, or 10, won't get too specific, and chosen to get in their car or vehicle and drive? I'm raising my hand too. I've been in college before. Mr. Burleson, never done that?
Well, I don't drink.
Okay. Do you not drink for religious reasons? You just don't like the taste, or?
Yeah, it's mainly for health reasons. I am a Baptist, and when I used to go to church when I was a kid, they said that you shouldn't drink. But that's not really why I don't. It's really just it's not very healthy. I really don't like the taste. Drinking can sometimes lead to trouble, so I don't drink.
Have you ever drank?
I have drank in the past, yes.
Mr. Daly, you don't drink at all either?
I drink it all.
Have you ever drank before?
No.
Ms. Ford, you said that you had drank some before and then gotten in your car. And I think the percentages here notwithstanding that probably the majority of people would say that, there's not necessarily wrong with that. Have you ever, though, drank and gotten in your car and successfully made it to your destination and then as an afterthought thought to yourself, well, maybe I shouldn't have driven that time. Maybe I did have too much.
No, never. I believe you have to stay in control at all times, and I would never do that.
Okay. Mr. Bird, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, you can never really tell. I mean, there have been one or two occasions where I might have, gotten home and said, it's maybe a good thing I hadn't got pulled over, but, I mean, I think I generally stay in control.
I want to tell you what the definition of intoxication is in Texas. It's the loss of normal use of your mental or physical faculties, or its blood alcohol concentration of 0.10 or greater. Now, that's 3 ways to prove intoxication. As a prosecutor, I only have to prove one of those. I don't have to prove all 3. Now what that means is, if I can prove to you that Mr. Alvarez had lost the normal use of his mental faculties, you must find, and the other elements, which are on a certain date, Mr. Alvarez was driving and was intoxicated in Travis County. My guess is, I think Ms. Bailey would agree that the main issue that's going to be in contention today is whether or not Mr. Alvarez was intoxicated. Now, if I can prove, thank you. If I can show you to a certain limit that he lost the normal use of his mental faculties, you must find him guilty. Mr. Daly, are you comfortable with that?
Very comfortable.
Okay. Mr. Bird, how about yourself?
Yes.
Ms. Ford? Mr. Burles? Additionally, if I can prove to you that he lost the normal use of his physical faculties, that's enough as well. Or, even if I don't have proof of any of those, if I can show you that he had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.10 or greater, you also must find him guilty of the offense of driving while intoxicated. Now, Ms. Ford, let me ask you. Hypothetically speaking, let's say that I did not have any evidence about Mr. Alvarez's mental or physical faculties. But I could show you that he had a blood alcohol concentration of 1 over greater. Now what that means is, you're not going to know whether or not he was stumbling, slurring his words, couldn't say his ABCs or anything like that, but you are going to know that after he was driving, or while he was driving, he had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.10 or greater. Would you feel comfortable with that? Would you want more evidence? What kind of things would you like to see?
Well, the law is if it's 0.10 or greater, he's guilty. And so with my husband being an attorney and all, I would definitely be able to do that.
Okay. Mr. Daly, do you agree with that? Or
Yeah.
Mr. Burleson, how about yourself?
Yeah, I guess I agree.
Mr. Bird?
I think so.
Let me ask real quickly. Has anyone here, besides Mr. Bird, ever been stopped or pulled over under the suspicion of driving while intoxicated? No? Anyone had a family member, a good friend, anything like that? Anyone's life been adversely affected or affected in any way whatsoever by driving while intoxicated in general? Maybe a family member or a good friend had an accident, anything like that? Anyone else here have had any contact with the law of driving while intoxicated, meaning you know someone that was affected or anything like that? No? Okay. I want to talk to you very briefly. You know what the law is, driving while intoxicated. I want to talk to you very briefly about how I have to prove that. I have to prove to you those elements that I talked about to a certain degree. And this is it, beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, this is a definition that the Court of Criminal Appeals, which is the Supreme Court in Texas for criminal matters, has given us. I want to read it very quickly. And this is not the whole thing, but the judge is going to give it to you at the end of the trial, so don't worry about memorizing it. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based on reason and common sense after a careful and impartial consideration of all the evidence in the case. It is the kind of doubt that would make a reasonable person hesitate to act in the most important of his own affairs. Now, Mr. Daly, does that clear up any misconceptions or confusions that you've ever had about the concept of reasonable doubt?
I'm not sure where it plays into, though. I understand the definition.
Okay. The elements that I told you about, meaning that Mr. Alvarez on a certain date drove while intoxicated in Travis County. I must prove to you those elements beyond a reasonable doubt.
Oh, I see. Right. Sure.
Mr. Burleson, does this clear up any thoughts you?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Ward, how about yourself?
Yes, I understand.
Okay. Mr. Berg? Okay. The first time I read it, it didn't make sense to me at all. And this is why, and I'm sure Ms. Bailey's going to point this out. It talks about a reasonable doubt being based on reason and common sense after a careful and impartial consideration, which implies to me that you're going to think about it. But then they come down here and they use this word hesitate. And a lot of people think, well, you know, if I hesitate, that must be a reasonable doubt. Mr. Berg, would you agree with that, though?
Would I agree with
That if you hesitated about one of these elements, that's by definition a reasonable doubt?
Well, I suppose it sounds like it from that sentence. That's what it's.
But it also talks up here about thinking about it, careful and impartial consideration.
Right.
Would you agree with that? Ms. Ford, would you want anyone deciding your guilt or whether you were not guilty without thinking about the evidence?
Oh, I want them to think about it.
Okay. Mr. Burleson, wouldn't you want them to think about it?
Yeah.
Mr. Daly? Mr. Burr? Just to wrap up here, I don't have time, and neither would Ms. Bailey, to cover every possible avenue that I would like to. I'm going to give you an opportunity now, though. If you have anything, for whatever reason, that you think or that you've been thinking of for the past 20 minutes, maybe Mr. Roark should know that. Or maybe Ms. Bailey would want to know this about me. Or I haven't been asked this, but I've been kind of wondering about it. Is there anything like that that you thought of? All Ms. Bailey and I are asking for is a fair trial. Is there anything that you can think of that would cause you to believe maybe I'm not best juror for this particular trial? For instance, if this was a burglary of a vehicle case and you walked out this morning to find your car broken into, I don't think Mr. Alvarez or the judge or even myself would want you on this jury because you'd be too emotionally attached. Is there anything like that, or just anything at all that you can think of that you'd like to tell me about now, or that you have a question about? No, Mr. Bird? Think of anything?
I think that.
Okay. Mr. Bailey?
I think I'd be a great juror. I mean, I don't think this has any bearing. I think I can follow the law. I don't approve of drinking, personally.
And that's fair enough, and all we're asking for is your honest opinions, and you've given that, and I know Ms. Bailey and I appreciate that. Mr. Burleson, how about yourself?
Well, I think I'd be an okay juror. Maybe I should tell you my brother did some time in Huntsville. But I mean, that doesn't affect my views on law enforcement or anything like that.
Okay. Ms. Ford, how about yourself?
I think I'd be a great juror.
I do have a question, actually. This form said you were served on a criminal jury, and I was on a grand jury.
Okay.
And I didn't know really how to answer that here.
That's fine.
So,
I appreciate it. Ms. Ford, you've been a witness in a case before, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, what kind of case was that?
It was a bar assault case a few years back.
Okay, and who were you a witness for?
I was the witness for the defense.
Okay. Roll call. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time this afternoon. For those of you who are lucky enough to be seated on this jury, and I really do consider it a lucky thing to be, Ms. Bailey and I, or myself especially, appreciate your time in this case. For those of you who are not, I hope you've at least left with some friends or a positive feeling about the justice system. And as much as I can say I've met you, then it was nice to meet you. Have a good day. Thank you.
Ms. Bailey?
Afternoon. I want to start off by introducing myself. My name is Kelly Bailey. I grew up in San Antonio. I'd like to tell you just a little bit about myself because I know that you guys have to fill this out, so we have all this good juice on you, but you don't know anything about us. I was born in 1968, and I graduated from high school in 1986 from Clark High School. And I moved up here to go to school, and like a lot of other Austinites, I never went back. You met Mr. Roark, and also want to introduce you to Judge Bill Allison. He's the judge that's going to be presiding over this case for the duration. He's pretty much in charge of all of us, and we'll have no problem telling us all what to do. The most important person in this courtroom today is my client, Mr. Victor Alvarez. Mr. Alvarez grew up in Nicaragua. He's 20 years old and moved here just a few years ago to go to University of Texas to get an engineering degree. He is living right off campus with a roommate, and as Ms. Roark said, was arrested, and that's why he's here today. When you came in here, I don't know what your experience was necessarily with courtrooms, and so I'm sure you've got some expectations, either through what you've seen on TV or heard from your friends. And most people, when they come in here who have no exposure, kind of have this expectation that they want to be a good juror. And most of us do have that expectation. And I also have some expectations. I hope and expect and really wish that I can ask you questions that won't embarrass you and that you can answer very openly and honestly, no matter how bad it hurts me. All right, so I'm going to test you. When you first came in and you saw me sitting down, and you saw Victor sitting next to me, Mr. Daly, what was the first thing that popped into your head?
That he's the reason why we're here.
Okay. Did you have any good or bad feelings about his being here?
Well, I mean, I don't think we can really make any assumptions until, we hear all the evidence, but I don't approve of drinking and driving.
Okay. Let's talk about that a little bit. Any consumption of alcohol, is that what you're saying, and then getting behind the wheel?
I think it's a sin.
Let's say that you were chosen to sit on this jury for drinking and driving, or drunk driving, I guess is the case may be. Would your opinions, your beliefs that this is a sin affect the way that you would view or sit in judgment of Victor?
I don't think so.
Mr. Burleson, tell me what leapt into your mind when you saw us sitting at the table.
Well, I didn't know what the charge was or anything like that, so when I came in, sat down, looked at him, and thought, well, he looks like a nice guy. He doesn't look, I wonder what he's accused of doing. He looks like a nice person.
Wonder why in the world he's here, right? Okay. When you heard Mr. Roark read over the information, the charging instrument, the petition, the thing that got us here,
Right.
What did you feel? What were you thinking?
I was thinking, I don't know, driving while intoxicated, I will. He looks like a nice guy, but I'm sure a lot of nice people have had too much to drink and driven. That's really all I recall.
Okay. And you, tell me this. What opinions do you have about somebody who is sitting on trial for drunk driving?
I mean, I don't know. It just depends. I mean, like I said, my husband's an attorney, and because of his job, I kind of have some opinions already because we discuss it over dinner every night. But I mean, I guess I kind of look at him as not, as a 20-year-old kid that messed up, but also someone that if he did mess up and if he showed me he did, he needs to pay for what he did.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about what your husband does. What kind of law does he practice?
He works for the Attorney General.
In what section?
He's in the Enforcement Division.
Okay. What is he enforcing?
Well, he enforces, it's complicated, actually, and I'm not sure I fully understand it, because like I said, we just talked about it over dinner, but he talks basically about the crimes that these people commit and how he wants to keep them in jail, and so he works every day to keep people in jail. So we discussed that and what low lives there are out there in keeping in jail.
So when you're discussing these low lives over dinner, what exactly do you guys talk about? Do you have any agreements or disagreements about these low lives and how they're supposed to be treated in the
Well, he
court
likes to
system?
talk a lot, and I listen. And I give him more wine. I mean, he's had a rough day at the end of the day.
Okay. So am I hearing you right to say that somebody who's been accused probably did something to get himself there?
Well, I would think so. I mean, I don't think that an attorney's going to waste their time or the state's going to waste their time. I mean, they did something. It's just a matter of whether, I mean, I can't even say that, I guess. I guess the state usually thinks the person did something, or they're not going to waste their time by bringing us all in here, I would think.
Okay. Now, that opinion that you have, if you were to sit on this case, would that affect the way that you would view Mr. Alvarez in light of his being arrested?
I don't think so. I think it would be real exciting to sit on this case, actually, because when I went home for dinner, I actually couldn't talk about something, but I'd be in with the legal stuff, kind of like what my husband does every day, but I wouldn't have to share it with him. So I think it would be a lot of fun.
Okay. Mr. Bird. Okay. Tell me a little bit about what you expect from somebody who's sitting on trial.
From someone who's sitting on trial?
Right. From Victor.
Well, I suppose I expect there to be good excuses that something went wrong, that something happened that was wrong.
Okay. And in this case, a drunk driving case, what would you look for? What particular kinds of excuses?
Well, I don't know if there really are many excuses, depending on, I don't really know much about what happened in this case yet, but, yeah, I mean, I can stand up and already said when I was stopped, I mean, I, was stopped and suspected, and then I was released because I was innocent. And so, and, I was proven innocent before I went to trial, so, I'm sure I have some questions as to why he's, at this point.
Why he's still here? Okay. Do you have some opinions about why he might still be here?
Well, I know that if I'd have blown, 1-0 or higher, maybe I would have been here, but I didn't.
So perhaps your opinion is that Victor did do something pretty severe to get himself here.
Well, it's possible.
Well, let's talk about intoxication. Let's talk about being drunk. All right, Mr. Daly, what do you want to see? What mental picture do you have of someone who's drunk? Describe their physical characteristics.
Somebody who can't really control how they walk, how they speak, what they say.
And how they speak? Okay. Can you think of a situation where somebody might not be able to walk properly and also is not intoxicated?
You mean when you talk about intoxicated, you're talking about drinking?
Drunk. Right.
Somebody could be on medication.
Okay. Would that be important for you to learn? if someone is actually on medication?
Sure. Somebody can have a disability.
Okay. What about, Mr. Burleson, what about speech? Do you agree with Mr. Daly that these are signs of intoxication?
They can be.
What are additional signs of intoxication, being drunk?
Maybe dizziness, kind of loss of faculties, slow reaction times, not really understanding what's going on, not being able to walk straight, those type of things.
Can you think of a situation where somebody might demonstrate all of those physical characteristics, but not be drunk?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about it.
Well, like he said, if they're on some kind of medication, that has some kind of reaction. Also, I think maybe nervousness or fear at being pulled over by a police officer might cause someone to act drunk just because they're scared, or they're I can see that. I can see this.
Okay. Let's talk about that a little bit. What about somebody who's not from the United States? Someone, say, for example, who's from a foreign country that doesn't have the benefit of having, that lives in, say, a police state. Would it be reasonable to assume that that person might have some fear about being pulled over by the police?
Oh yeah.
Ms. Ford, thank you. Ms. Ford, tell me a little bit about how a person acts when they are nervous.
They fidget a lot.
That's what I'm doing? Okay.
They fidget a lot, just seem real uncomfortable and unsure of themselves.
Okay. What would you want to hear from, Ms. Ford, a witness, let's say an eyewitness, about someone who they believed were intoxicated?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the relevance of this question.
Brad, what was the question?
I'd like to know what Ms. Ford would like to see in a trial from a witness who believes the defendant is intoxicated. What physical characteristics?
Your Honor, with all due respect, what she would want to see is irrelevant.
Rephrase your question.
Ms. Ferguson, describe a drunk. I'm sorry, Ms. Ford, describe a drunk for me.
I think it varies. I mean, there's the drunk that you see,
On the Annie Griffith Show?
well, that like I see every morning when I get to work at the Texas Employment Commission. There's the homeless people that are sitting out there and reek of alcohol, and they're pretty drunk. And then there's the people that stagger, and then there's some of my husband's friends that like drink way too much on a nightly basis.
Okay.
When we go to parties and stuff.
Well, how do they act?
They get real obnoxious with their wives, and their wives end up driving them home.
Okay. Mr. Burke. Let's talk a little bit about someone's speech. When someone is intoxicated, do they generally show signs of intoxication or being drunk by the way that they talk?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people who talk really fast, hard to understand, a little sometimes slur. Yeah, I think so.
Could someone have all those symptoms, slurred speech, quick speaking, and not be drunk?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I agree with the juror down there about nervousness can play into it. I've been pulled over for speeding or something. Your heart starts beating, and even if it's something really minor like that, you feel uncomfortable. So yeah.
Okay.
I don't know about cues, slurring, but maybe a little bit.
What if a person is not from this country, say has a thick accent? How are you to tell whether that person is actually slurring their speech or is just speaking in a different dialect?
Well, I guess I don't know.
Ms. Ford, do you have any idea?
That would be hard to do.
Mr. Burleson, would you
Well, yeah, I guess it would be a problem.
Mr. Daly?
Oh, it seems like if you were slurring your speech, you could tell no matter what language you were speaking.
I want to talk to you guys a little bit about some of our constitutional rights here in the United States. When someone is charged with a criminal offense, it's the state of Texas, in this particular instance, who is required to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person that they are accusing committed the offense beyond a reasonable doubt. Mr. Daly, I want to talk to you a little bit about your opinion of that particular philosophy that our forefathers established in our Constitution. If you could have it your way, would you have the state, the person who's making the accusation, prove beyond a reasonable doubt all of the elements of the offense, some of the elements of the offense, or in fact, would you have the defendant prove himself innocent?
What do you mean by elements of the offense?
Okay, I'll talk to you about that. In this case, this is driving while intoxicated. The state of Texas is going to have to prove that Victor Alvarez, on or about January 1st, 1998, did then and there intentionally, knowingly drive his automobile while intoxicated. So they're going to have to prove each and every one of those elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Would you have it set up that way, or would you do it differently?
They all seem pretty important to the claim, so yeah, I would have it that way, sure.
Ms. Ford, how do you feel about what Mr. Daly said?
I mean, I'm a little confused, I guess. I mean, I don't know why you need to show all those things. I mean, I guess they're important, and if you tell me that I need to look at all those things, I can look at them, but he either was drinking and driving or he wasn't.
Okay. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you are sitting on a murder case. It's a week long and it is hideous. In the beginning of the case, the prosecutor stands up and reads something called the indictment. When you're on a grand jury, you learned about indictments. Okay. So, stands up and says, on or about the first day of January 1998, John Smith did then and there intentionally knowingly kill Bob Jones by shooting him with a gun. And after sitting on this jury for a whole week, you hear that John Smith killed Bob Jones. You hear witnesses testify how horrible and gruesome and bloody it was. And you hear the coroner come in and testify that this guy, in fact, was killed. You hear the parents come in and identify that this, in fact, was Bob Jones who died. But you learn through all these witnesses that he wasn't killed with a gun. He was killed by being stabbed to death with a knife. All right, you're back in that jury room. You're thinking about this. Are you going to find the defendant guilty or not guilty?
My gut level is to tell me he's guilty, but again, if you're telling me that I have to look at all these things, I'm going to have to consider all those things, and if the knife versus gun thing is going to be an element, as you say it, then I guess I have to consider it, but I'll be honest, my first inclination would be to lean towards guilty.
Okay.
5 minutes.
Mr. Brotherson, how do you feel about that?
I'd say not guilty.
Mr. Daly?
Not guilty.
Okay. Mr. Byrd?
Well, I don't know. I remember staying home from work, so I worked by myself, and I watched a lot of the O.J. Simpson trial, and I learned a lot from that. In combination with my grand jury service, and I realized that, sometimes, if all this evidence is there, but maybe one person thinks they can't convict because of one, discrepancy, I have a little bit of trouble with the standard, so I don't know.
So maybe you do something differently.
I can't say for sure one way or the other.
Okay. The last thing I want to talk to you guys about is this reasonable doubt definition. We've all read it, and I never really made sense of it until I started getting into it, and I kind of came up with an example that makes sense to me. Okay, Mr. Daly, I'm going to pick on you for a little bit. All right, let's say that you're a runner, you're a competitive runner. You don't do it for a living, but it's certainly a big part of your life. And you're having some problems with your foot. You don't know what's going on, but it's getting worse and worse. Not only can you no longer run, but you can't even walk anymore. So you go to your doctor, and the doctor says, I think I know what's going on, but I'm certainly no foot specialist. I'm going to send you somebody who is. So you fly in and get off the plane, you go to the doctor's office, and this wall is covered with certificates and plaques, and this is the leading foot surgeon in America. And the doctor looks at you and he touches you and he puts you under some tests. And he says, I know what this is. This is a neurosclerosis sarcoma. You say, oh, really? Yes. I've had much success with this neurosclerosis sarcoma, and we can do surgery on it. The only downside is there's a slight chance that you may never walk again because something could go wrong with your surgery. But if everything goes well, you're going to be back on your feet, and you're going to be running in about 6 weeks. Okay, you're sitting in that doctor's office. Would you agree with me that running is one of the most important of your own affairs, or whether you walk again?
Sure.
And you considered all of this evidence, if you will, the doctor's credentials versus your ability to walk. And after you've considered it, and you've given it a fair and impartial consideration, are you going to decide to have surgery like that?
If I've thought about it,
If you've maybe,
if I've considered it.
if maybe you've hesitated a little bit? Did you immediately
Well-
make the decision to have surgery?
I mean, comparing it to our role as a jury, if I thought about it, like the prosecutor said, if I thought about it, and I thought that that's what I needed to do, then that's what I wanted to do.
Mr. Burleson, given all what I've just said, can you decide to have that foot surgery like that?
No.
What are you going to do?
Probably go home, think about it, maybe ask the doctor some more questions.
Are you going to hesitate?
Yes.
Ms. Ford, are you going to think about it or are you going to hesitate?
I'm gonna get a second opinion.
Okay. You're going to do it? You're going to hesitate?
Hesitate.
That hesitation that you all sensed once I gave you that example is the same kind of hesitation this example discusses. So at the end of the case, you guys go back into the jury room and you're thinking about this, you're giving all the evidence a fair and impartial consideration. And after going over it and thinking about it, you still hesitate, you feel that tug, that equals not guilty. That's what you need to think about. And it's not just not guilty on whether he was drinking or driving, but it's not guilty on each and every element of what the state is required to prove. That's the crux of our system. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't know, it sounds okay, but, to say hesitate, if I'm maybe going to put someone in jail, I might hesitate for the wrong reasons.
Like what, for example?
Well, if I maybe feel sorry for them, even though I'm convinced that they did it,
Okay.
I might, hesitate a little. I don't know if that's what you mean by hesitate. If I had real questions about the facts of the case, that's understandable. So,
Ms. Ford,
Yes?
do you understand the concept of hesitate?
Yes, I do.
Now, how is the state going to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt? They're going to bring in some witnesses who are going to testify to their belief as to Victor's intoxication.
Judge, I'm going to object to getting into the facts of the case during board hour.
I'm not going to.
1 minute.
And one of the other ways that they can prove, as Mr. Roark said, drunkenness is talking about an intoxilizer. So it's another issue that you guys are going to be addressing. And lastly, I want to ask you, in your opinion, for somebody who's drinking and driving, how would you punish them? Would you punishment for punishment's sake? Would you punish to rehabilitate? Or would you punish to deter? Mr. Daly?
I think all three is probably good.
So you couldn't delineate, you would choose all three?
Well, my brother's a state trooper out of Dallas, and he tells me all kinds of stories about horrible accidents involving people who drunk lots of alcohol. And I think punishment is important. I think deterrence, keeping people from doing it, is important. And what was the third one?
Punishment for punishment's sake, deterrence, or rehabilitation.
Sure.
Mr. Roberson?
I think that that driving while intoxicated is a mistake, and I think that it doesn't necessarily reflect on a person's character. So I think that the big thing to consider would be what can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? What can we do to make sure that this person realizes that his or her behavior is dangerous? You know, not so. I don't really believe in punishing. I believe in helping the person.
Ms. Ford, what is your opinion?
Oh, I don't know.
Judge, this is all irrelevant since defendant's going to you for punishment.
Okay, let's line it up. Okay?
Ms. Roberson? I'm sorry, Ms. Ford.
Can you ask me a question again? I'm sorry.
If it were up to you, would you
Judge, I'm
punish-
going to again object.
Sustain.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time. Without you, truly, we could not do this. And this is the most important cornerstone of this society, is our opportunity to come in and have a trial in front of our peers, and we appreciate it, and thank you.
Okay, thanks. Questions?
Oh, do we get challenges for call?
Who would they have struck?
Who just struck? Brian?
One person.
Here we go. Any question as to who Kelly Bailey's gonna strike?
Unless you could get him on for cause.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be cause.
Probably, did you get in there? I don't think I can get you on cause. I think I can get you on country. Probably you two because of the beyond the reasonable doubt issue. 3 and 4. Yeah, Kevin charged cause because he couldn't understand the hesitation beyond reasonable doubt.
I don't know that as a judge, I don't know I'd let you have any cause at this point. Brian, who'd you strike?
I think I was right. Either Ford or Bird. Ford, didn't have enough time to get into why she was a witness for the defense and how she felt about all that. Bird obviously is a fairly heavy drinker. So that's not good.
Yeah. You might easily associate with the defendant in this case.
Exactly.
Brian, let me ask you something. You got a question out of an answer out of Ms. Ford, something about Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, and you kind of let that drop and went on to the next one. Why?
Because I assumed that she was either a member or sympathetic to, and I
Okay.
didn't want to.
And another, did you say loss of eye movement? As a
Me?
no, somebody has I got that down. Loss of some kind of movement. All right.
Loss of hearing.
That's what it was, right? As a symptom of intoxication? I'll never win this drinking battle. Okay, questions out there about what
I was wondering why you didn't try to pursue him further along the religious lines to try to get him
We ran out of time.
for cause.
We ran out of time. There's a lot I would have done, and a lot I would have done differently.
Why don't y'all tell them what y'all are trying to achieve and what are trying, since you're prosecuting like the third
Since I'm already on the good side, generally, people are looking at the prosecutor as the white hat. I'm mostly trying to get you to relax immediately, start making jokes. I usually make a joke about how hard the benches are in those kind of courts. And just get you to like me above all else, because I found that if I can really get jurors either sympathetic with me or just like me or don't hate me or whatever, for whatever reason it might be, whether it's just because I'm the prosecutor, or they like the way I stand, or they like the question I asked them, or it's because I made eye contact, or whatever it was, then I immediately have a leg up. I've had a lot of people come and tell me afterwards weird things where you got to thinking, I wonder what they were really thinking about. Like, I've had numerous middle-aged, I always tell people I'm single, especially if there's a lot of ladies on the jury, to be honest. Not young ladies, but I've had a ton of middle-aged ladies come up afterwards and try to set me up with their daughters, their nieces, etc. And it sounds bad, but I mean, if that's the way, if that helps me, then you kind of got to go for that. And it oftentimes, if part of your case is weak, if they like you or if they just don't hate you, because they're going to immediately, not like the defense attorney, no offense to Ms. Bailey, and it's nothing personal, but it's a fact that most juries, I think, do think this guy's here for a reason. So mostly I just try to get people to like me. I get them to stand up, move around a little bit, get comfortable with each other. And if I fail on the law and explain it and everything else during voir dire, if they at least have some type of good feeling about me, then I think I've done a pretty good job.
My turn? We go in with presumption that this guy's just a scumbag and he did something to get himself in the situation. So my strategy is kind of three-pronged. One, to dispel a lot of the presumptions or myths that this person is truly a scumbag, because at least most of my clients are just regular people and they're doing regular people kind of crimes. There are certainly exceptions to that. Well, I mean, like drinking and driving, that's a regular person crime. Murder is not, raping is not. And get them familiarized with the law, and then lastly, get them struck the cause, because that's the best thing that you can do. Try to develop them, show them there are some biases that they do have, and let them know that it's okay to have these biases, that they do have a presumption this person did get here for a reason, that it is a real bear to overcome the state's got to prove each and every element beyond a reasonable doubt. Juries seem to, I know a few of you kind of latched onto that. That's hard for them to conceptualize, especially when you give them the murder example. And then get them to start thinking of things that you seed and let them blossom, because they end up contracting with each other, not with you, because they don't really trust you. You're there to snowball them, and they know that. But if you can get them to just not hate you and then like each other, because they'll talk about it. They'll go into the jury room and talk about, well, do you remember what so-and-so said in voir dire? Isn't that really the concept here? And that's what you're trying to do. And here you only had 20 minutes, so it's a really short time to develop all these issues. But kind of got a taste for it.
Any other questions based on those comments?
I like your introduction. I thought the whole personalizing of it, saying, well, you gave us information, I'll give you information on myself. Maybe you feel more familiar, I guess.
Yeah, I usually go into that a little bit more.
How closely do you look at the cards? I mean, there's a couple of things that, looking for things that aren't answered or people don't know about until ask. I mean, is that just a habit?
Yeah. I try to know as much as I can about the cards, but my experience is the cards don't tell you nearly as much as what most people are willing to.
Brian, does your office still run the list on the against criminal list?
Yes.
So you actually know that before going in, that the defense attorney does not know? You know if they're lying or not, basically, when they
Correct.
answer certain questions?
Yes.
But
I'm sorry, I completely missed that.
We run a criminal history on each of the our members to find out.
But the judges will give the defense attorney that if it's part of their discovery request, since that's available only to the prosecution. Our judges locally, if you ask for it, will require them to turn that over to you at 1 hour. So we routinely make that part of the discovery motion for the jury.
Yes.
What do you do, I mean, when you're asking them questions and you're looking for a particular answer, but nobody says it? And, I mean, like, I wanted to say, like, exhaustion. I mean, sometimes you're just so tired that you can literally, your eyes can be bloodshot from being awake for so long, and you can just literally, you're drowsy, can't walk straight. But nobody said exhaustion. And I was, like, sitting here going, what about exhaustion? I mean, and you didn't say it.
Right. It kind of cuts both ways. If you had a bigger panel, most of the time somebody will give you the answer that you want. It's so much better if somebody else gives it to you than if you suggest it, because it comes from a tainted mouth. She's the devil, and sometimes I just will suggest it, and they kind of get people talking about it if I have to. It's a real important issue. Otherwise, I'll just drop it and move on because it'll become really obvious in the trial.
Brian, how long have you asked the jurors to introduce themselves to each other? Is that something that you just came up with, or have you seen somebody else do it, and you liked it? Or?
I came up with the standing up part, and the great thing about that is, and I've probably done that the last 10 trials that I've done, I've actually had a defense attorney, I've asked everybody to stand up, and I had the defense attorney look over, elbow his client, and they stood up too. And I mean, when you've got the defense attorney and his client standing up, I mean, that's control. And the jury, the Voir people know you're in control, and that's what you want. I couldn't have asked for anything more than for me to tell everybody to stand up and have the defense attorney actually stand up. But I think it's good to just loosen people up and get them to talk. And a lot of times, I walk up to the first person in the front row and shake their hand, introduce myself, just to get people making contact. And also, during one trial, I had 2 people that did not stand up, and that kind of made me think certain things, and I think I ended up striking those 2 individuals. So there's several things you can get out of that.
Any other questions? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
What's the